So welcome everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight. I'm Lisa Kulp. I am the Director of Community Initiatives, and during our webinar today, which is supporting your loved one when and where they need it, I'll be giving you an overview of the CD-PAP or Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. I'll also talk about the Children's Health Home, and then my co-presenter here, Charissa, is going to jump in and do some self-directed services with us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Everybody can see the slides?
Looks good.
All right. There we go. All right. So I'm going to start off by talking about the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program tonight. This is a program, we're going to call it CD-PAP. You might also hear CD-PAP for some things. It's the same program, just a difference in whether people are saying the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program or Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Services. But it is a Medicaid-funded program that allows eligible recipients to self-direct their home care services. So this service is through the Department of Health. It is really great because the person or their designee, whoever is helping them to direct their services, they have control of when and where they receive these services. They have control over who supports them, and they have control over how it is that they're supported. Personal assistants can provide the same tasks as a personal care aide. They can really provide services across the board, whether it is helping people to get some grocery shopping, helping them with picking up some medications. We can administer medications through this program, which is different than some of the services you're going to hear about later on today. Personal assistants can also offer medical tasks. So anything from, helping out with administering those medications to doing suctioning with a tracheotomy. It's all up to what is in that person's plan of care. In order to be eligible for CD-PAP, you must be a New York State resident. You must qualify for Medicaid, and you have to have active Medicaid throughout the whole time that you are in this service. You must meet criteria, so you must be elderly and or disabled and require assistance with activities of daily living or those needed skilled care. And then you must be medically stable. So this particular program, we are trying to keep people out of the hospital. So you have to be stable enough to be at your own home. And you have to be capable of overseeing your own care, or you have to have somebody who can help you out with that. I'm going to talk about that just a little bit more in just a second. So who can be a personal assistant? Really, anybody that you want can be a personal assistant, okay? If somebody's acting as your designee, they can't be your personal assistant because you can't sign off on your own time card, so to speak. You can't be the designee and be the person who's helping to hire and pay those personal assistants. So a family member, a friend, a neighbor, really anybody can be hired as a personal assistant. In many cases, the people who are going to become your personal assistants are people who are already providing those supports. Now we can just get them paid for doing those things, right? There are two caveats to this. So spouses and a designated representatives cannot serve as the CD-PAP assistant. So if it's your husband or wife that you are looking for support for, you can't be the one to provide services for that person. And then parents of a child who's younger than 21 cannot serve as the CD-PAP assistant. They can serve as the designee, however. Okay, another family member or friend would then come in and be the personal assistant. All right, so who do we serve here at Heritage? We serve all ages through CD-PAP services. We have county contracts through Monroe, Erie, Niagara, Genesee, Livingston, and Ontario counties. We also contract with managed long-term care provider networks, iCircle, Nescentia Health Plan, and Molina. Those are the only insurance companies that we work with currently. And then when you partner with Heritage, you really are partnering with us. We become a co-employer for you. So we act as fiscal intermediary, and we're going to help to assist really with those administrative functions. So you find staff for yourself or your loved one, and then we help them to kind of get onboarded, so to speak. So we would provide a little bit of kind of that necessary orientation kind of training. We help with, there's some medical paperwork that needs to be on file as part of these services. The Department of Health has some guidelines on that. We help with all those things. We help people get paid, that sort of thing. So that's our role as the fiscal intermediary when we're partnering with CD-PAP services for folks. And then every single agency does CD-PAP a little bit differently. So we always encourage people that when you become eligible for CD-PAP, you sort of shop around, so to speak. So at Heritage, we offer the things that you see on your screen. So our current pay rate for personal attendants is $16.20 per hour. That does change based on Department of Health standards, things like that. For Heritage, all staff accrue 1 hour of paid sick time for every 30 hours worked, regardless if they're full-time or part-time. Full-time staff working a consistent 32 to 40 hours per week are eligible for health benefits through Heritage for our CD-PAP services. Currently, we are allowing 8 hours per week of overtime, and that's if your authorized hours allow. So when you become eligible for CD-PAP, part of your plan of care outlines how many hours per week your personal attendants are allowed to work and get paid for. So if you have 48 hours per week and you have just one staff who's helping as a personal assistant, they would be able to be paid that 8 hours of overtime currently. And then we do have at Heritage, we have additional benefits through EAP and the success coaches that we use here at Heritage Christian Services. So again, every single agency does it a little bit different. So we do encourage you to kind of call around and see if Heritage is right for you, or if maybe another agency might have a little bit of a different setup that might work. Okay, so that was CD-PAP services. I blew through that. Does anybody have any questions? I'll give everybody a minute. I know you're all on mute. You know, CD-PAP's really a great option if you have somebody who's living at home and they need those daily living services, and you've got a family or friend that they really trust that can come on and provide those services for them. The nice thing about CD-PAP is that it can be used in conjunction with some of the things that Charissa is going to talk about later, the self-directed services. So even though CD-PAP is through the Department of Health and the self-directed services that Charissa will talk about are through OPWDD, we are able to have both of those services going on at once. That's a little bit different than what I'm going to talk about next, which is the Children's Health Home services. So if you're receiving services through OPWDD, you would not be eligible for the Children's Health Home services. So that's a little bit different. So let's talk about what that means. So Heritage is a care management agency that's contracted through CHUNY, which is the Children's Health Home of Upstate New York Network. The Children's Health Home is regulated by the Department of Health, and this service model allows all of a child's caregivers to communicate with one another so that a family's needs are addressed appropriately. So the way that we do that is we assign you a care manager. Some of you may be familiar with care coordinators. Care managers are a little bit different in that we are really sort of the point person. We really work very, very hard. We're the liaison between the family and all the providers. Between all of the different providers, we can connect across different specializations. And the whole goal of the Children's Health Home is to provide a really holistic approach to care, ensuring that all service providers know what's going on in each one's domain, and really helping with that. And so I talked about some of this already. I knew I was jumping ahead of myself. So the care manager's primary goal is to work with the family to assist with access to services. We want to make sure that you have everything necessary to stay healthy, to stay out of the emergency room, and to stay out of the hospital. That's really the biggest goal for these kiddos. Their needs are such that without some service, without some coordination of care, they may end up in the emergency room or the hospital, and we don't want that to happen. This really is a family-driven service. If you decide that it's not something that you want to work on, that goal is not going to be part of your plan of care, right? And we really want it to be holistic. It's not just focused on one kind of narrow aspect of a child's life. We can help coordinate with teachers, with schools, with mental health, medical, a lot of different providers. And then through the Children's Health Home, we are able to serve many, many counties across New York State. As long as we can drive there in a reasonable amount of time, Chani probably supports that county, okay? So in order to be eligible for Children's Health Home, you have to have a child from birth to age 21. They must be enrolled in Medicaid, and they must maintain active Medicaid throughout their time with the Children's Health Home. And then the child has to have 2 or more chronic conditions, and that can be conditions like asthma, obesity, depression, anxiety, things like that can come into play there. A developmental disability, intellectual disability, that could be one of those chronic health conditions. Or they might have one single qualifying condition. So any child who has HIV or AIDS, who qualifies for severe emotional disturbance, and there's some criteria around that, complex trauma, or sickle cell anemia. They have any of those 4 diagnoses, they're automatically qualified for Children's Health Home. And again, remember, this is through the Department of Health. So if the child is actively receiving services through OPWDD, we wouldn't be enrolling in a Children's Health Home. But you can see here that it's not just kiddos with intellectual or developmental disabilities that are served through this model. It's really any child who has some chronic health conditions who could use some coordination of care here. Okay. Before we move on to self-direction, are there any questions about the Children's Health Home at all? No? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Charissa. And Charissa, I think I need to stop sharing so that you can share.
Thank you, Lisa. That was helpful. That was a lot of information in a short amount of time. I apologize. I'm trying to multitask and unmute and move screens and make sure you can see what you're supposed to be seeing, everyone. All right. So like Lisa was saying, self-direction that I'm going to talk about is through OPWDD, and it really does or can work really well with the CD-PAP service that Lisa was talking about first. Children through the Children's Health Home would not qualify for self-direction because there's no PWDD service. There is a lot of information about self-direction that I can't possibly kind of condense into the presentation today, but I'm hoping to give you guys at least enough information that you can ask more questions, or if you really do think that it might be something that someone you love is interested in, that you could reach out and ask more questions. Our contact information will be, both Lisa and mine will be at the end of this presentation. So definitely feel free, if after this you feel like you've got more questions and just want to talk about them or see if this, any of these services make sense for your family, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. So self-direction is an OPWDD service, like Lisa said. So that does mean that we can only support people who are approved for OPWDD and have the home and community-based waiver. In most cases, folks who have OPWDD eligibility, they're going to then pretty quickly pursue the waiver, the home and community-based waiver. And then at that point, their care coordinator or care manager would be able to connect them with self-directed services. So self-direction is not like a single service. So unlike CD-PAP, where it's that aid that you are, that support person that you're paying, it's one kind of single service. Self-direction has a whole variety of services that do include some staffing options. And I will get into just a kind of a brief description of what some of those options are in a couple of slides, but really it's a wide variety of services and supports that are designed to give people a greater choice over how, when, and where they receive support. So very similar to CD-PAP, it is people being able to choose the supports that they are receiving, where, who's providing them, when they're getting them, how they're being provided. Self-direction is available for both adults and children who have OPWDD services. Heritage serves, I think our youngest is like 1 year old right now, and I think our oldest is well into their 70s. So we do really serve a wide age range. We provide services in what OPWDD calls Region 1, but that essentially is the 17 counties that make up the Western New York area, so Buffalo, Erie, Niagara, all the way down to the Pennsylvania border. And then we also serve the Finger Lakes region, which would be Monroe, Wayne, Ontario, Livingston, again, all the way down to the Pennsylvania border from here. So we do serve a wide area, and we're always looking at expanding, but right now that's the area that we're focused in. Within self-direction, each person that chooses to self-direct receives a funding amount. We call it the PRA, Personal Resource Account. It's basically a funding limit that's based on the person's adaptive needs, their behavior support needs, and their health needs. The assessment currently that they're using is called a DDP-2, or Developmental Disabilities Profile 2. You might be familiar with it. Hopefully you are, because hopefully your care coordinator is sitting down with you and doing that every 2 years. But that assessment will look at the person's adaptive health and behavior needs. It is kind of put into a calculator type thing that then spits out some scores that we then use to determine how much funding the person has. The person would then work with some support people through OPWDD as well as their families to kind of figure out, okay, so I have X amount of money, let's say I have $80,000. Now what? And how do I use this? What are my options with this money? So the person would work with a broker, a fiscal intermediary, probably their care coordinator or their care manager through person-centered services or prime care, and their family supports, friends, parents, siblings, whoever it is that they would want involved. And they would work together to figure out how to use that money. The broker is kind of the key piece. The broker is the person that really sits down with the family and puts the money into the actual budget template, helps the family write up that justifications, and then they send it over to the fiscal intermediary, which would be Heritage, to make sure that it meets all of the available guidance and then get that final approval from OPWDD. It does take a little bit of time. Luckily, right now, the state is moving pretty quickly with approvals. But it is a process that it's not instant or quick, because we do want to make sure that those services that you guys are choosing, you understand them, that they really are the right fit for your loved one. Heritage does not provide agency brokers right now. We do have a few agency broker cases, but we've slowly kind of transitioned to more independent brokers. So most families are working with an independent broker, which essentially means they're not connected to an agency. They don't have any of the conflict of interest potentially there. You know, they really are independent. And that broker is kind of key to kind of putting all of these supports in place for the person. But Heritage would be the fiscal intermediary. So that would mean we are overseeing the self-directed funds. We are helping you use them. We're helping you access them. And some of that will become a little more clear as I kind of go into what sorts of services self-direction could cover. So what services are available in self-direction? The services that are listed here are all services that you would build into a self-directed budget, or you could build into a self-directed budget, but it's not comprehensive. I kind of stuck with the ones that were most likely to be used, only because there's so many options out there, and it would be easy to overwhelm you when it's one of those things that I think slowly as you learn, it'll start to make more sense and you'll be able to make it work better for your family. So broker, like I said, most families are using brokers that are independent. The broker cost does come out of that self-directed budget. And that broker's job is really helping you build the budget, put it on the template, get it submitted, write some justifications. Some brokers help people find employees to hire on. Some brokers really help with actually submitting reimbursement requests into the system. Some brokers are really super active. Some brokers are more, they'll contact me if they need me. So that's where it's really important through this process to interview brokers and make sure that what you're hoping for and looking for, that broker that you're choosing is able to provide. But so broker does come out of the budget. It's not an expensive service. They can only bill $40 an hour, and they can only bill in 15-minute increments. So in terms of cost, it's a relatively cheap service that generally does make self-direction easier to choose to have a broker. There's self-hired community habilitation. So community habilitation is a goal-driven service. So essentially, you would work with your broker to come up with goals that you wanted staff to support your loved one with. There's not a lot of limits on it. It could be learning how to cook. It could be learning how to use public transportation. It could be learning how to clean, how to make friends, how to cross the street, how to, social skills and communication skills. There's really not a lot of limits. We've seen folks use their community hub staff for learning how to navigate college. Maybe they're going to college and they need help with that organization and figuring out how to get through classes. We've seen community hub staff that work solely on goals in the community and staff that work solely on goals at home. There's so much flexibility with that service. And the benefit of self-hired, because you could go to an agency and you could ask for community hub, but a huge benefit of self-hired, which is only available to people who self-direct, is there's a lot of choice over what you're going to pay the staff. So at Heritage, our current cap for paying a self-hired community habilitation staff is $28 an hour. Like Lisa was saying with her services, there are limits on that. It kind of depends, what are you approved for? Each budget is so specific to each person, and sometimes you can prioritize having high wages. Other times you need more hours, which means you got to pay a lower wage so you can get more hours. So that's where working with that broker to really kind of figure out, where is my priority? Do I want to pay the $28 an hour but only get 15 hours a week of staff? Or do I want to pay $20 an hour and get 30 hours a week of staff? So that self-hired community hub has so much flexibility. The majority of budgets, other than for kiddos who aren't eligible yet, you have to be 8 for community hub. It's in most of the budgets that we do support. And it's great because people get to choose what the staff are doing, when the staff are working, up to their budget amount. They can choose how many hours they want the staff to work. And then they can also choose that pay rate, which is a little different than CD-PAP. CD-PAP, you've got the county that's telling you how many hours, and the county kind of dictating where the pay rates are. Within self-direction with OPW, there's a little bit more control there. And then there's also self-hired respite, which we see in a lot of budgets for kids. We also see it for adults, but we tend to see adults transition more towards community hub and working on those goal type things. Respite's really supervision. So it's just staff that are there keeping the person safe, but they can still do fun things. They can still go out in the community, go to the movies, volunteer, do fun things like that. but the main purpose of respite is a break for caregivers, and the staff are primarily providing supervision. But just like community had, you have a lot more say over how many hours are in the budget. You have a lot more say over how much the staff are paid. We currently cap self-hired respite staff to 18 an hour. So it is a little bit less than community have. And the big thing is they're not doing as much documentation. You know, they're not working on those skill building tasks. They're really just providing that supervision. So those are, we generally see staff, some sort of staff. If it's a mixture of ComHab and respite or just one or the other, we generally do see those in self-directed budgets, but not always. We do have a good number of budgets that don't have any staffing in at all. Some other services that we see in pretty much every budget, there's a big service category called individual directed goods and services. We'll call it IDGS often. It's capped at $32,000 a year, as long as your budget is at least $32,000 a year. Each line or some of the lines have their own funding limits, but it's a resource that can help cover camps. So summer camps for children, we cover a lot of YMCA camps, Rochester Museum and Science Center, zoo camps. So there's some camps that are specific to people with disabilities, or some epilepsy-based camps that we've covered. So it's a great way for children to have a safe place, and adults to have a safe place to spend some of their summers. Community classes is a big one. So that just is where the broker and the FI will work with you to kind of figure out what's your person that you love, what's their interest, what do they want to do. In classes, and then we try to find classes that might be a good fit. You know, if they love art, then we might try to see what art classes are out there in the community that we could use the budget to cover. It can be personal training, it could be cooking classes, it could be dance classes, social skills classes. There's a bunch of classes over at Autism Up that have, you know, some really great resources for children, and they have some really great classes for adults as well. Spectrum Creative Arts, Hochstein School of Music. There's so many options out there. The nice thing is that for many of them, Heritage has created a relationship with them, and we're able to pay them directly so that families aren't having to pay the money and wait to get reimbursed for the costs of these classes. And ultimately, it's leading to people with disabilities having greater access to their communities, making relationships, connections, and learning skills that they might not otherwise have the opportunity to learn. There are some therapies that can be covered through budgets, not your traditional like counseling, not speech therapy or OT or PT, anything that Medicaid could cover, we can't. But we could build in art, music, aquatic, therapeutic riding, and play therapy are some options within self-direction. There's also transportation reimbursement. So as you are signing your loved one up for a bunch of classes in the community, you can also get reimbursed your mileage for bringing them to those classes. Community memberships, I skipped over that, but we see a lot of like YMCA memberships, Strong Museum of Play memberships, the zoo, RMSE, all of those sorts of things. Anything that's a membership that really gets people out into the community and have greater access. So another one we see less common, but for parents of adults, so parents where your child's now 18, we can also cover up to $500 a year in parent training. So if there's a conference that you want to attend, or even, you know, if it's an online conference or if you're going somewhere type conference, we would be able to possibly cover those as long as your child's at least 18. Some more services are family reimbursed respite. This is a second kind of respite. And this respite's where instead of having Heritage hire on the self-hired staff and pay them through our payroll and all of that, you know, maybe you want to hire a grandparent who really doesn't want to go through the whole hiring process. Maybe you're hiring a college kid who's really only available in the summer, and they too don't want to go through the whole background check and fingerprinting and all the paperwork. Family reimbursed respite gives families who are supporting their loved one at home $3,000, where they can private pay someone and we'll pay them back for the respite care that they're paying for. And then housing subsidies. So you'll see over on the right hand side, I have a little asterisk that basically if there's an asterisk next to one of these services, it does mean it's only available for people who are at least 18 years old. So it wouldn't be available for children. But housing subsidies are available, which basically just helps pay a portion of someone's rent if they are deciding to move into their own home. You know, sometimes parents will buy a house for their loved one. Sometimes their adult child will want to rent out their own place at an apartment complex, or share a house with some friends, this housing subsidy would help pay for the rent. And then some other things that we often see in self-direction is cell phone reimbursement, internet reimbursement, staff activity fees. So that's for any of the self-hired staff. So if we hired on like a self-hired community hub staff, it helps cover their fees. So they're not having to pay their own money to maybe go to the movies with your loved ones. So your loved one would still pay for their own movie ticket, but the staff activity fees can reimburse the staff for whatever costs they're incurring. If they go to movies, if they go to a play, if they go out to eat, those sorts of things could get reimbursed through the budget. There's another bucket of transportation money here. So the first one I was talking about was really specific to you taking or someone going to the classes or the memberships that the budget's paying for, or the therapies that the budget's paying for. This other mileage reimbursement comes out of a state funded line, and it's really a lot more general. As long as it's something that's important to your child and reflected in their life plan, you can probably get mileage reimbursement to it. And even plane tickets. So if your loved one's life plan says that they just love Disney and they really want to go to Disney, we could possibly use some of these self-directed funds to pay for their plane ticket to Disney, or for their mileage if they were to drive down to Disney. So it's also what we see it used a lot for with adults is getting to and from work. So that's always a challenge and a barrier is transportation. It is capped at $3,000, so it's not going to get someone through a whole year of working if you're trying to use Uber or Lyft, but it can help offset some of that cost for transportation to and from work. Clothing reimbursement up to $250 a year, but only for those who are over the age of 18. Utility reimbursement, again, for those over the age of 18. And then there's kind of a catch-all category. Really, if there's just things that you can't find other funding for, but the person you love really needs it, and it's related to their health, safety, or independence, it's worth asking Heritage if it's something that their self-directed budget could cover. So we've seen things like weighted blankets, trampolines, sensory items. We've seen all sorts of things that we always get some creative requests in there. But again, as long as it's related to their health, safety, or independence, and there's no other funding through any other mechanism, we could likely put it in there. But that too, everything that falls under this category called OTPS, which is other than personal services, any of that whole category is capped at $3,000. So you kind of have to pick and choose with your broker. How do you want to split that $3,000 up? Some families just put it all right into their mileage reimbursement and just feel like that's easier. Others have a little bit in kind of everything, but the broker would be able to help you figure out how to use those funds. So I also kind of flew through this. Again, it's tough because there's a whole lot of like rules and regulations right within these, but honestly, that's the job of Heritage. That's our job, is to help you understand the rules. So if it's something that you're feeling like would be a good fit for your family, for your loved one, I would say ask questions. I would say give me or Lisa a call if it's her services that you're interested in. We have a really, really knowledgeable team. We don't have a lot of turnover on our team. So we've got, most of our FIs have been with us for at least 3 years, or at least have experience with other FI agencies. So you're in the hands of people who really get the complex service system and really can help it make more sense to you. So I won't ramble on more, but I think hopefully your questions can kind of direct any further conversation from here.
Did anybody have any questions about any of the services, CD-PAP, Children's Health Home, self-direction?
I do. I'm Sue Vanderbeck. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Sue.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see your faces. I'm trying to figure out 2 questions. How often can the budget move money around in any given year? And if there's funds in a vacation portion of the budget, how do you access that? If a family goes on vacation and brings the child, can their portion of the vacation be then billed and paid for under that vacation budget?
Excellent question, Sue. And it's good to see you too. It's been a little while.
Yeah.
So as far as how often a budget can be changed, I guess 12 times a year would probably be the most accurate answer, but I will say that you might get a little pushback once you hit 6 or 7. I'm like, why are you having to change and move funds so much? But it is meant to be flexible. We do know you're going to forget something else is going to come up. Every budget is always effective the first of a month. And so any budget change would have to be the first of the month, and you can't have 2 budget changes effective the same month. So that's why I'm saying 12, once a month. You could probably change it. If there was something urgent that came up, like you say you put in a budget amendment, totally forgot something needed to get in there. It's possible we could get the state to make an exception and allow 2 changes in 1 month. But it would be the exception, and we would have to have good justification. There's 2 types of budget changes. There's full amendments that go all the way to Albany. Those ones take longer to come back and get approved. At different points in 2022, I saw them take 4 or 5 months. So those, we try to avoid them because they take so long. There's also cost neutral budgets. Those are the ones you've had to sign probably. And those you can actually backdate up to a month, and those come back much more quickly. So there's a lot of flexibility there. The state will start to ask after 6 or 7 in a row, like, is this poor planning? Does your broker not know what they are doing? Why are you doing this? But
yeah.
And then your vacation question. So it's actually, I'm really glad you asked that, because I know everyone kind of gets hooked on Disney. I can cover Disney.
Yeah.
But it truly is just the travel. It's just the mileage or the plane ticket. It's not the hotel. It's not the food. Staff could go as well if the person had staff that they needed or wanted to bring with them, and they could get paid for their time as long as it's within the United States. So travel is limited to 50 United States, Canada, Guam, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands. So basically U.S. territories. We can't do Paris. We can't do China. We're really stuck with those places. But it comes out of the line called personal use transportation in OTPS. So you'd want to see if your loved one has money in that budget line. You'd also want to look at prior budget usage and just see, is this one they're already using on day-to-day travel? If they're already using it, might not make sense to wipe it out with a trip, with a plane ticket to Disney. But if they're not using it, it could make sense. So I would ask your broker or your FI, or if you have access to the budget, take a quick look at it, see what's in personal use transportation. And that would be the budget line.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other questions anybody would like to ask?
I can probably.
Actually, Charissa, would you mind terribly popping up our contact information slide?
Yes.
Thank you. And while Charissa does that, unless anybody else has any questions, I will let you know that I believe it's Megan. Megan's going to put a survey in the chat. We would really love it if you could fill that survey out for us. And here is our contact information. So for a CDPAP or Children's Health Home, please feel free to reach out to me, or you can email CDPAP at heritagechristianservices.org for CDPAP specifically. We have a small but mighty team of people who are very responsive to that email. So they are able to reach right back out to you pretty quickly and help you to get the information that you need regarding CDPAP. And then just a note, to be evaluated for eligibility for CDPAP services, it's not actually us that you contact. It would be the local Department of Social Services in the county that you live. And you can easily Google that to find that. Many people call and say, I want to start the eligibility process. And, my answer is always, that's wonderful, but we can't help you with that. So please reach out to the local Department of Social Services if you specifically are ready to talk about eligibility for CDPAP services. And then you can see Chris's phone number there.
So Lisa, hi, this is Lisa Arrington.
Hello.
I have a question about CDPAP, and I'm an attorney, so I sign a lot of people up for CDPAP and work on the Medicaid for them. But one of the issues that we have getting folks onboarded is if they, especially with some of my elderly or older clients, if they are not computer literate or don't have computers, it's been difficult to get them onboarded and get them through the training that they need. And I'm just wondering, during COVID, everything was through the computer and online. But now does Heritage offer any help, like where they could actually come into the office with the CDPAP team to get somebody onboarded?
That's a great question. So most of our onboarding is through online services.
Yep.
That being said, there are computers that we can access in the office. So if somebody doesn't have access to a computer, they don't have access to reliable internet, whatever the case may be, they just need help navigating. We certainly could set up a time with them, and they can come in, we can get them set up on the computer, we can help them navigate those things. It's not very often that we do it, but we certainly would be happy to help in that way.
Okay, because it's not always easy to find staffing, right? And if you have
Yeah.
somebody who really wants the job, but they just are not computer literate, you don't want to lose them because they can't manage the onboarding process.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the beauty of the CDPAP service is that it is somebody that you love and trust who's
Right.
providing your care. And so we hope to make that onboarding process as easy as possible. So if it is somebody who needs that help in that way, we certainly can work that out.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Great
Yeah, it's a
question.
great
Thank you.
program. Yeah, it's a great program, and it really does work well for a lot of folks, keeping people in their homes.
Agreed. Agreed. Any other questions? Well, Megan just dropped in the chat that if you are interested in attending any of the other Wednesday webinar series, educational webinars, you can go to that website. It's heritagechristianservices.org/seminar. And if there are no other questions, on behalf of Charissa and I and the Heritage Christian Services Foundation, who helped to put this on, thank you so much for joining us tonight.